so smart of me. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for coming. This is an exciting session, and whether or not you're here present or listening to it at a later date, this is going to discuss the success framework, and in addition, how it's worked with procurement. We've been working with the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. We have Rick Little here, and I'm excited about that, and I appreciate him for coming. We also have Paul Kikuchi, who's going to help us with this presentation, and Shane Williamson as well. I'm Sean Holland. I guess I'll just introduce myself, Paul. Procurement manager with UDOT. So we're going to just go through and explain how the success framework works, why it's set up, what it can do for you. Considering the many systems that we all interact with, there's a lot of room for improvement and understanding how to focus our energies, how to prioritize, and how to make a bigger difference with the limited resources that we have. So that's sort of the goal and takeaway that I hope we can all gain from this discussion today. So as I mentioned, Sean Holland, Rick Little's here, Paul Kikuchi, Shane Williamson, and I'll wrap things up at the end. So I'm going to hand things over to Rick, and we'll go from there.
Hi, it is on. Okay. Oh, you just have to put it right here.
Right there.
All right. Thanks, Shane. Sean, rather. Sorry. I think it's Shane.
It's close.
As he indicated, in fact, Greg Gardner is here with me. We're both from the Governor's Office of Management and Budget, and we're going to talk just for a few minutes about the success framework in a fairly general sense. I'm just curious, how many of you have some familiarity with success already? You know, some of you I know have seen, but for those who don't, it's a statewide effort, and it results in large part due to what we call a basic conflict. Think very high level about this, but society has a demand for government services, and that demand for public services continues to increase faster than our ability to pay for those services. That sound right? Hopefully that resonates with most of us. Now, in government, our revenue equals our cost, generally. We spend every penny we typically take in as taxes and revenue, but we're not allowed to spend any more than that. So that means that the demand for services then outstrips our ability to really pay for those things. Well, the success framework is specifically engineered to address the gap between our ability to meet demand for services and our ability to pay for that. Because people want things better, they want them faster, and hey, if they can do that by paying less taxes, that's even better. And that's the environment that all of us in the public sector live in. So the success framework is a systems approach to improvement. Well, what do I mean by systems approach? Well, there are many, many parts in an organization: people, policies, technology, business processes, measures, design. You can see the things that are there. I don't necessarily read them all. But they all play a role in the performance of your organization. Well, when all of those things work together in harmony, then the organization thrives. But when they're misaligned in some way, then the organization underperforms. Sorry. All right. So our system. It's okay. All right. Sorry. The systems approach that we're talking about here uses something called the theory of constraints management. Have any of you ever heard of that before? Theory of constraints. It's taught now in a lot of management courses. It's another approach. Many of you have heard of Lean or perhaps Six Sigma. Theory of constraints is associated with those improvement efforts. And what it does is it helps us to focus on the system. And so, especially in transportation, there are many, many systems in transportation that have multiple parts to them. And we measure the capacity of each of those. And so if this was a system, as an example, and the first activity or the first step in our process can accommodate 12 units during some interval, let's say in a week. And then when those, we call them throughput, when those units pass to the next station, they can do 10 in a week. And the next one can do 8 in a week. But then the last two you can see can do more than 8. Well, what's the constraint in this system? Well, obviously it's the one that limits our ability to do more than 8 units. The fact that stations 4 and 5 can do more is great. So if we improve those, does it help the system? It doesn't, because we're still constricted or confined by what happens in that third activity. Well, the systems approach, the success framework, focuses on identifying where those constraints exist and to try and address those constraints. And we do that by first identifying where they are. We then try to exploit them. Now, when we use the term exploit, what we're saying is that we want to make them better. It'd be great to make number 12 or 10 on either side better, but we really need to make the one at the constraint better, because that's where the system impact will be. So if we can make it go from 8 to 9, that's exploiting it. That's making it do better. But sometimes you've done everything you can within that system to make it better within the existing resources. And so in number 3, we want to then subordinate everything else to it. It might be that we can transition resources from other areas into that one area and bring that up to 9 or to 10. And once we've done that, then, and it's a last resort, then we can elevate the system. And when I say elevate, what I really mean is that that's when we add resources like staffing or money or investment in order to get it to increase its capacity. But we only do that once we have exploited it, well, identified it, exploited it, and then subordinated all the other parts of the system to it. Now, once we've done that, hopefully we can make that 8 a 10 or an 11. If we make that an 11, then where's the constraint? It's at one of those other places where the 10 exists, right? So we ensure the system constraint has been addressed, and then we go back to step 1. In state government, we have a number of strategies to help us to specifically do those 5, what we call focusing steps. And so success is an acronym, and I'm not going to go through that acronym right now. You can see that it's here. But each of those has a set of very specific tools that are used. And my specific responsibility at the Governor's Office of Management and Budget is to work primarily with the use of data and analysis. I'm responsible and accountable for measuring all of the activities that we're currently doing in state government. We have more than 80 systems now that we're working with in state government, and we've identified about another 50 that we're still going to be working with to try and bring them in to the success model. So in talking about the use of data and analysis, we begin with this idea, and that is that every system exists to do something. If it doesn't accomplish something, we really need to question whether or not we should be doing it. So they do something. Well, that something that they do needs to be something observable, and that's throughput. But it's not enough to simply do it. We want to do it well. So if I go into a state office for a particular service, it's not enough for them to simply say, "Oh, okay, well, here's the paperwork. We'll see you in 2 weeks." We expect them to do it well, and maybe doing it well means that I get served now, or that I don't have to, go and get more information or something. And then finally, we want to do it for the best possible price. Because remember, the basic conflict that we have is the government services, the demand for those services has increased faster than our ability to pay for it. So we want to make sure we're getting the best price. Well, those three variables are a measure that we call QTOE, quality, throughput, and operating expense. And so what we're doing is we've created then a measure. Now for the public sector, this is a little like our measure of, well let me do it this way. If you were in the private sector, what is your primary motive for being in business? You want to make money. And how do you typically measure whether you're making money? You get your revenues, you pay your costs, and the difference between those two is profit. Generally, so at a really high level, right? This is akin to that kind of methodology. This is the public sector view. This is a measure of the value we buy per dollar. So let's look at that for a moment. Quality describes the effectiveness or the degree to which our throughput meets some standard of performance. Throughput are the volume of units that pass through the system. It could be the number of people served. It could be the number of miles of snow removed from our roads in a storm. I mean, there are all kinds of things that constitute throughput. The sum of the total costs are the operating expenses. And then we put them together in an equation that measures the efficiency. So to illustrate this, if during some baseline period, I meet my quality standards 80% of the time, and I do 1,000 something per week, and it costs us $10,000 to do that, then the QTOE for that baseline period is 80 times, or 80% times 1,000 divided by 10,000, which is 0.08. Well, if in the future we do a bit better in our performance for quality, and we go to 86%, we're able to do more units, but those more units cost us more money, which is something I want to emphasize. This is not about cutting money. It's about being smarter with the money we have. And so in this example, we take the 86%, we multiply that by the 1150, we divide it by the 11,000, and we got 0.09. Are we better off? Yes, we're better off. We're getting more value per dollar. And what we're interested in measuring is the difference between those over time. In our office, we're really not focused on whether it's 0.08 or 0.09. We're interested in what the change is over time. And in that example, what the change is the difference between 0.08 and 0.09, which is 0.01. And so the change, this is algebra for those of you who have been through 7th grade, is a 0.125 difference. What does that mean? It means we're 12% better off than we were before. And that's what we want to track in the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. We're tracking that. And the governor, using this measure, has challenged state government as a whole to be 25% better than we were during the baseline period. And this is how we measure that. In order to put that into terms that allow us to tally results, to aggregate results across systems, we index all of these measures. We index them to 100. So in the example before, while it was a 0.08, we say, well, that started at 100. It's like starting at 0, but we used 100, so that in the event someone has a negative performance, then they're not 0 or negative, they're just a number that's less than 100. Well, that allows us to combine these scores. They are weighted based on their share of operating expense. But what's neat about that is that it allows us then to look at how the QTOE changes for all systems across state government, and allows us to see how the state is doing as a whole. This is the actual data through the end of June. I've run preliminary numbers through the end of September. We've got a lot of systems yet to report for September. But at 123, now that's the trend. What we do is we plot the value each month, and you're going to see in an example for procurement how they're doing. But we plot that value each month. We regress the trend through that, and it tells us that we are at 123 as of June 2015. We are 23% above where we started. And that's pretty close to the governor's objective. I think we're going to make it. The deadline for us to get there is January 2017. So we're feeling pretty good about it at this point. But we're still yet to add another 50 systems who are just beginning their journey. So that's going to keep that line, it won't rise as much in the future as it has in the past. And that is a quick explanation for what the success framework is, how we measure it, and now we're going to talk about how that applies to procurement.
So now we'll hand it over to Paul, and he's going to just give us an overview of how this does apply to our procurement system.
All right, thank you, Rick. We started out, I'll go back to the very beginning, how we started this process. And we met as a group. We brainstormed on paper all the possibilities of our assembling blocks that we had in our systems and how we basically did business. And we, after we got them all on paper, there was probably about 75 to 100 identified roadblocks that were keeping us to work efficiently. We take those individual items and group them into like items, into different segments. So if this goes up to here to this like item, this would go to here, and this one would go down to this other column. And once we found out our group, here's the brainstorming we did. These are just some of the items that we came up with was training. For example, it was hard to schedule. We were training the wrong people because the right people that we needed to train weren't there, or they had projects they're working on. Seasonal rush workload, unclear scope of work, reworks, so on. So anyway, we brainstormed, we came up with all these different scenarios, and from that, we came up with these 5 bundles, what we call. These are our blocks that didn't enable us to work efficiently. The first one was the lack of a full kit. And what that means is that when we get a requisition, we didn't have all the material available to process that requisition efficiently. We'd have to go back to the customer and ask for accounting, ask for a clearer scope of work, what do you mean by this, and so forth. The next stumbling block was training. We needed a clear training objective to take out to our associates out in the field. Communication was the next one. Communication is always a problem, whether it be internally or dealing with our external customers. It's just a stumbling block for everybody. Technology was another one. What can we do to improve our processes to make it more streamlined, to make it more automated for our customers? And then the 5th one was personnel and cross-training. After we analyzed our roadblocks, we came up with this information. You'll see that 50% of our problem was not getting a full packet, full kit to move on to our requisition. We had to go back to the customer, ask for information, and so forth. Another 20% is on training. Training our customers about procurement rules, about how to use PSO, and then another 10% is on communication. And actually training, when you do the training, you'll actually improve the communication, and you will also greatly improve our full kit process. And that's exactly what Sean did. So on our, excuse me. So on our projection plan, we set out we wanted to set out clear procurement instructions to our associates out in the field so that they had a full understanding of the procurement rules, basic guidelines of procuring on contract, when you couldn't, and also too, the limitations on when you could use emergency purchasing and so forth. We updated the procurement agency policies, and we improved procurement training. We now have our procurement training online and on the UDOT University. Sean did a face-to-face with the regions. Each region in the whole state, as well as most of the stations themselves. Also, we developed a purchasing guide individually to that region. So it's specific for that region. It has the regional contacts, who to contact in case they have stumbling blocks in the procurement process, rather than going up to our department. And then the last thing is, or excuse me, the ongoing development of procurement staff, and that's through training. We have huge amounts of training we go through. State purchasing offers a training program monthly. We have NIGP, we have CPPB accreditations, CPM, and we also have an Achievement of Excellence Award, which is submitted annually to see how our processes and procedures rank with other departments, other government agencies throughout the whole United States. And the last part was team restructuring and cross-training. There was a lot of purchasing agents that had the same commodities for years, and that was changed, and now we have new thoughts and new processes through new agents doing that same commodity, and we could go back to those team members that have done it previously for guidance and assistance if it's needed.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it, and thanks, Rick. We'll now have Shane Williamson. He's going to take a little bit of time because he was instrumental in developing the user guide that we put out initially in Region 4, and then we implemented it throughout the state, throughout all other UDOT regions. So, Shane, if you mind taking a few minutes here.
All right, this is exciting because it not only, what we've done is it doesn't only help the region, but it's also helped Sean's group become successful in their endeavors. But I don't know, it's something that's been big in Region 4, and I know it's trickling to other regions. I know Region 2's excelling at it at a rapid pace. But what we've done is basically there was a big gap in training and the people knowing where to go and what they needed, as well as their lack of the full kit. A way that we can, as a region, we can help identify that, improve it through making sure they have the information. So we developed, to start, we developed the procurement user guide, which basically is a quick reference to find about anything you need to know. I mean, it's not in regards to procurement, so it has the procurement policy, contacts, not only in the region, but with Sean's level, and even some warehousing. We brought warehousing into it as well. And then frequently used contracts. What we added into it is, in Region 4 specifically, is all the contracts that are used in Region 4 we have in there, and I update it every other month so we make sure we're up to date. So what that did is it helped us reduce purchasing errors by 51% in the first year. Now it seems like a really big number, and it's awesome, but the mass volume of it makes it, it's 50%, it's 49%. It's still a big number, so we have a lot of improvement. But the biggest thing I can say with it is what it's helped is it's helped the end users understand procurement, understand their jobs, understand how to do it efficiently. That way, ultimately, we're reducing costs of what we do, because when you're trying to, they've explained, we're trying to get a job done for a certain budget, and yet a misunderstanding of the purchasing rules and the purchasing philosophy costs us, 25% more money than we're really actually just going behind. And so that was the goal with this, was to educate, to train, and to try to improve the process overall. So, that's about all I have on that.
Thanks, Shane. I want to thank all of the presenters here. Again, the audience is much larger, and I appreciate that. I forgot to acknowledge Greg Gardner. I appreciate him coming down, absolutely. Greg and Rick were instrumental in helping us through this process, and they continue to be a support for us. And so I hope those of you that are interested in this, learning more, there's a lot of information on the GOMB website. Please look at it if you want to know more and learn how you can apply it to your own systems. I think this is just the beginning. It's not an end to, an end target that we're necessarily shooting for, but just uncovering how your system operates, it opens your mind to things you never thought possible. So I'm excited of where this takes us, where the next step is. And so that's what next I'll show you sort of, this is a graph of our performance in procurement. And it's 2 years of data from when we started in July 2013 until June 2015. And you can see there's a lot of ups and downs. We've had good times and bad. And there's a cyclical nature to what we do, so we understand that better now than maybe we did before. But with this, we understand that we are improving. We've actually achieved over that time period nearly 100% improvement, which is quite remarkable. And so the question is, what do we do with that? What does that even mean? And so I think Paul touched on that quite a bit, but some of the improvements we made as a result, which I think this program, this implementation of the Success Framework has enabled us to do quite a few things. First of all, our quality requisition throughput. We can get requisitions processed faster, so our end users can get their product and services faster. And that goes back to the training and having a full kit. Second is the increased capacity to solve more problems and take on greater challenges. If those issues that are constantly on the back burner that we never have time for, we can dedicate a little more time to fixing those issues. The third one is team development, restructure, and cross-training. We've completely changed our team in the last few months, and that's had its own challenges, but we've been able to focus on things we haven't in the past. We not only have a procurement team, but the other part of our group manages our warehouse and our inventory. And with this restructure, we've been able to dedicate greater resources to the management of the warehouse and our inventory, which wasn't the case before. So we can put a greater focus on our warehouse. And again, the freed up capacity as a result of our performance has enabled us to do this restructure. And then the cross-training as well. We now have a more dynamic team. We have greater bench strength. We have multiple resources for any given commodity, whereas before we only had maybe a single expert or source for knowledge. And then the final thing was we implemented an entirely new position just recently. Technology is a challenging procurement endeavor. If you've ever purchased anything with DTS, there's a process there. In addition to the procurement process, you have to get approval from DTS. So in the time I've been here, I've seen a lot of frustration and challenges. And it's not DTS's fault, it's not procurement's fault, it's just understanding the process. So with our increased capacity, we created within our group an entirely new full-time position that's dedicated to overseeing the DTS procurement process. And so that's, I think, going to continue to help end users throughout UDOT to not only get their DTS procurements faster, but understand it better. And so these are, I think, great accomplishments, and I thank our whole team. This takes a team effort. We've worked hard on, as a group, developing better training, getting out, meeting the regions. There's Shane Williamson, and each region has their respective purchasing analyst that is helping us understand the needs of each region so that we can respond better and faster. And so ultimately this framework helps us focus our energy, and we've been able to accomplish all of this as a result. So again, I want to thank everyone that's come out this afternoon. Thank Rick and Greg, Paul, Shane, thank you all for being here. And at this point, we'll take any questions that you may have. Yes?
I had a question for Rick. So on the currently measured 80 systems or so, are there any or how many are there that haven't seen success to this point?
There's a lot. Yeah. What often happens is that some of the systems that we went after early were the ones that, when we started, we invited agencies to identify those systems where most of their costs were identified. We sort of used an 80-20 rule. We asked them and said, identify where you spend 80% of your money, and let's identify those systems first. And so we engaged those systems early on, and those are the more mature systems that you see the results for now. And because they tended to be, relative to all of the systems, a bit larger in terms of their costs, the results were pretty strong and have not been as much affected by newer systems that come in with, say, less cost, less operating expense. But in that, there are a lot of systems, and not all systems are improving. And so we're identifying those and trying to work with them. Occasionally, it's because there are external factors that we need to try and account for in determining their metrics. But we are glad to say that most systems are improving. Most of the improvement is in the area of quality, but over time we also expect, again, because there's a natural increase in demand for throughput in most systems, but it's going to take us several years, I think, to see that to be a really strong upward to provide upward pressure on the numerator and the QTOE. What we want to do is make sure that the quality is identified and strong, and that as throughput then increases, that quality and throughput together will increase faster than the increase in cost. And so to answer your question, we've had, there are a number of systems out there. I don't have an exact number, but I could get one. But yeah, there's still a lot of systems with some challenges, and some of the newer systems we're working on are sometimes a little more difficult sometimes to identify.
I might just add to that. It is based on the operating expense of each system, and the procurement group we've been fortunate to be trending in the right direction. But there are other systems at UDOT that have a much larger operating expense, and so we're not doing much to. We have a little impact, and but the idea still holds true. Sure. Wait, Becky, did you have a question?
I was just wondering, can you share a great success and maybe even the different department, what they've done, what challenges they've overcome, and the success they've seen? Sometimes it's always interesting to know how other departments.
Go ahead, I'll take that.
Okay. I think there are several that we could point at. We've highlighted some, by the way, on our website, GUMB. We have an area in there that we call success stories. And so some of those are listed there. Often in those short articles, they're like 2 or 3 paragraphs, they're pretty short. But often their results from the QTOE will be described in there. One that does come to mind, talk about over at Criminal and Juvenile Justice. It's fascinating to me, by the way, in this job. There are government services I had no idea existed. This has been just a revelatory job. It really has. Well, some of you may know, and I kind of hope you don't, because if you do know this, then it may very well be that you've been the victim of a serious crime. But for those who are victims of crime, there is, depending on the circumstances, and it usually relates to their having been a victim of some sort of physical violence. It might be that they're a survivor of a family member who was killed in a crime, something like that. And the state has, it's like an insurance policy. They actually pay what's called reparations to the victims of crime. And I didn't know that. Anybody? Right? It's not the kind of thing you'd necessarily know. But that exists, and it's really there to kind of help funeral expenses or short-term medical expenses, sometimes until normal medical insurance kicks in, some of those kinds of things. All right, so that's the system. And they had a team, I don't remember how many people. I was going to say 16 to 20 people that would process these claims for having been the victim of a crime. Now, you have to kind of appreciate that when you've been victimized, it's an emotional experience. And so you have individuals who, with the very best of intentions, need to retell the story every single time that they're engaging somebody in the state system. Can you imagine how much time that is on the phone for someone who is taking what is, for all intents and purposes, an application for a claim? But they've had to spend a lot of time working with these people on the phone, you know, sympathetic. Well, that particular team had come to believe that that role was part of the job. But you know what? There is, in the criminal and juvenile justice system, there's a whole other function, another system of, what do they call them? Victim advocates? Victim advocates. This is the kind of thing you learn. Well, guess what their job is? Their job is to be that sort of intermediary, that person to whom they're going to tell the story. They're going to help them sort of walk them through some of the state services that will allow them to recover and get better. And the folks in the victim of crime unit taking these claims were, in a sense, duplicating many of those services rendered by the advocates. Well, going through this process and then mapping it out and determining all of these things, it became apparent that they could increase their capacity significantly if they would let the advocates do that part of the job, and if they would focus instead on, we call it, the term that we use is blue light. And what that means is just that it's that part of your job that is really central to your getting your work done. And all of these sort of extra things that happen are then, you're given permission to not do them anymore. And that was very liberating for that team because, again, they had felt before that, I got to spend 90 minutes on the phone with this person to get something information I can get from them in 5 minutes. So these kinds of exercises, you talk about a success story. What happened there was, it used to be that they would take the victims of victim reparations. On average, they were taking more than 60 days to process a claim. When they made some of these changes in the office around allowing the victim advocates to have a more primary role in that process, claims were being processed then. Initially, they set a target of 45 days, and they blew through that. So the standard today is 30 days, and you know what? They're looking to make it 14 days. And so whereas before then they had this process, remember we talked about people want better service? It really is a service to those victims of crime to get those claims processed, if possible, in 2 weeks instead of 2 months. And so dissecting this and kind of going through it, that's a success story. It not only made CCJJ more efficient, but it actually provides a much better service to the citizens. Now, that's just one. There are many. Okay.
Is that okay? So, and what Rick described is what you did, is those victim advocates would build a full kit, and they would create a complete application, give that to the requisition or the decision makers on the application, and then they can make that decision faster and faster. That's what you've done. You get the full kit, and your folks can make those decisions faster and faster. So we have a saying, if you can implement the success framework in the prison, you can implement it anywhere. So it was a case study we had at our annual conference. It was in the prison in a housing unit called Oakers 3 and 4. It's a medium security setting. They have about 288 inmates in there. And so we did a system map or a process map with the correctional officers, the sergeant, lieutenant, the captain, and they mapped out their process. And what immediately became apparent to them is they had a constraint there. And the constraint was the correctional officer having very limited time to do their safety and security duties and to sit down with the inmates and do a case action plan. And so as they looked at their process map and they looked at their constraint, they determined that if there was a way to reorganize the work so that these correctional officers would have more time to do safety and security, that it would be a great benefit. Because one of the things they need to do, they need to go into this. There's a lot of mischief that goes on in the prison. You might not be aware of that, but they have to go in and check the cells. I mean, people are making wine out of the toilets with the potato skins. They're making shanks. They're doing all sorts of crazy things. So they need to do these safety and security checks, and then they need to work with these offenders. They want to reduce recidivism, so they want to do a case action plan with these offenders and put them in the right treatment and education and reduce their risk of repeating offenses. So when they leave, their risk score is reduced and recidivism is reduced. I think it's about 65% recidivism rate, 65% return back to prison. So they want to reduce that. In 3 years. It's very expensive. It's $28,000 a year to house an inmate. So they don't, for a lot of reasons, they don't want them to come back to prison. So what they did, very simply, they just put the schedule for they basically worked 12-hour shifts. They put the schedule on the board, and how much time did they have to do safety and security and case action planning. And they found out these correctional officers were being interrupted every 5 minutes. People entering or leaving the housing unit, and they had to check them in, and they had to check them out, and do strip searches, and do all that kind of stuff, and they never had time to focus. So what they did is they developed a schedule of people moving in and out of the housing unit. Movement between housing units would occur at the top of the hour for 5 minutes. The barber would come in at this time. The medical staff would have to come in at this time. And what they did, just by changing the schedule, they increased the time that correctional officers could spend on their blue light duties by about an hour and a half every shift, which is pretty significant. And then they also transferred duties to the night shift, some of the basic duties. So the result is what their success measures were: reduce negative events, which are all of those things that happen in a prison setting, the fights, the disobeying the rules, and increase CAP compliance, or going to class, going to the treatment. And so they reduced negative events by 18%, and they increased CAP compliance by 19%, just by being able to focus more on that blue light and doing their safety and security duties. And they're just starting. That's their initial results after about 3 months. So they're planning to move to every housing unit in the prison in Draper and Gunnison over time and increase the blue light of the correctional officers. So that was a gomb.utah.gov. They have all of the presentations from our annual conference. You can go on there and you can see that presentation too. But 100% improvement, that's pretty amazing, Sean and team. That's outstanding work. Do we have any agencies? We have very few systems that achieve that result.
Well, it begs the question that we have to challenge ourselves more, so we probably need to up the ante. We need to start turning requisitions in 24 hours. You think that would work, Paul?
Great. Reset your measure.
Well, that's the inevitable next step, is resetting our measures, which it's exciting to get to that point and see where we go for the next 4 years or so. So anyway, if there are no other questions, thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. Let you go and get ready for dinner. So thank you.